Thank you very much, Louise, and hello everyone and welcome to OTF Connects. Thank you for giving of your time, a night of voting, to be with us for tonight's session. I'm very happy at the variety and number of workshops that we are able to offer this year. We are very fortunate to receive funding from the ministry to support teachers in the use of technology and in the area of mathematics. So we're very fortunate to be able to offer a number of sessions on these topics. It's my pleasure to welcome Aviva Danziger, who will be facilitating tonight's webinar on delving deeper into documentation. Aviva has facilitated numerous very effective workshops for OTF Connects, and I would like to welcome her again here tonight. Aviva, I'll turn the mic over to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Syria, and thank you, Louise, and both of you actually for inviting me to come on tonight and to talk about documentation. Maybe everybody in the chat window could just type in what their teaching assignments are right now, so I kind of have an idea of the grades and positions that people have. Okay, I see some grade 1s, which I'm into. Awesome. JK to grade 2, wow, that's a nice split. Karen, is that a straight classroom that you're doing JK to grade 2 in, or is it like prep coverage for those grades? Oh, wow. That's a very big split. Okay. So I see most people, I guess, are in primary. So I have taught primary as well as junior grades. I'm currently teaching grade 1. I've taught everything from K to 2 for basically, this is my 12th year doing so, but I've also taught grade 5 and grade 6, and I've done prep coverage for everything from K to 6. So I do have some different examples in here on documentation for the different grades, and by all means, if you have questions, please feel free to either hit the microphone button if you want to talk, or if you want to put it into the chat window. I will try hard to kind of keep both the chat window and the presentation going so that I can refer to any questions or share ideas if you have some other ideas to add as well. So it would be great to learn some new ones. So this is Delving Deeply into Documentation, and that's my name. This is the Twitter handle at Aviva Loca, and I do tweet quite a bit. I've got my email address on there as well if you do have any questions, as well as my professional blog. And I do try to blog usually 3 or 4 times a week. So I try to kind of share my thinking about what's happening in the classroom or what's happening as part of our board, and sometimes reflecting on what I'm doing, but also kind of reflecting on what the students are doing in the classroom and where I might be able to go next. So we've kind of done this actually as part of the chat window on what division do you teach in. So I'm not going to actually make you use the polling tool for that first one because I asked people to put it in the chat window as well. But I know that we're primarily dealing with K to 3, and I'll try to keep the discussion kind of going on that one. But if you do have questions about other grades as well, by all means, please do pop them in there or share ideas for the other grades too. I'm not sure if, Catherine, I know you said you do reading recovery. I don't know if that's just for the primary grades or if that's something for junior and intermediate as well. So I will try to kind of address that. Okay, just grade 1. Okay, so I kind of started with this picture of growing success because I think when it comes to assessment, we need to be considering assessment for, as, and of learning. And documentation can support all of these different types of assessment. And I do kind of think back to growing success when sharing some of the different things that I do in the classroom, but also when looking at how I'm going to document the learning. I think that often we kind of consider that final project or that test that comes at the end of the unit, but documentation helps us kind of look at the learning that's happening every day in the classroom, but then beyond just looking at it, think about what kind of changes and practices we can have based on what's happening every day in the classroom. So one of the things that I've tried to do is, as I mentioned before, I am quite a big tweeter, and every day I attempt to tweet out the learning that's happening all day long. So I will take pictures, sometimes of students, of student work, as well as record podcasts, videos, screencasts. Sometimes I'm the one doing it, and sometimes it's my students or a combination of us doing it. And then I put it together in a Storify story and put it on our class blog. And Louise, maybe we could do a showing of that link at the bottom, now a tour of that link, just to kind of show that daily shoot that happens.
I'm going to grab that for you right now. My computer is acting like a dinosaur tonight, so I'll have it in there in 2 seconds.
No problem, thanks. So as Louise is pulling that up, this daily shoot post is one that I put together at the end of every day that kind of takes all the tweets that I send out all day long, takes the videos and the podcasts and the screencasts, as well as some examples of student work, and gives a little bit of context with it, with the use of some kind of my story. And in the story, I try to link it to the curriculum expectations that are being addressed from the different activities that we do. And then in bold at the end of each story, and at the end of each part of each story, I write in some questions for possible follow-up activities at home. So this is the one that I did today. I am a fan of alliteration, so I always try to start the story with, or call the story something that has a little bit of alliteration in it, because I am kind of a fan of it. Oh, hold on, I don't know why that didn't work there or why we're back. Apparently there's a security warning problem, I don't know why. At least that's what I'm getting here.
Okay, so you're seeing something. I'm seeing your blog just fine. What is everybody else seeing?
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, you should be seeing Ms. Dunskir's class, a window into our learning. You've got a warning sign. Okay, no, go ahead and click on the link in the chat then.
Okay. So I won't take long with this one, but and hopefully people have pulled it up there. But as you can hopefully see from today's one, that what you'll see is that I've kind of given a context. I try to put the language and kind of group that piece together and then group the math piece together. And I really do try to integrate the rest of the subject areas. Now, often some math seeps its way into language and language seeps its way into math as well, but at least it kind of gives a bit of a context to what's happening. And then I pull together all the tweets that kind of go with that part of the day, and then in bold at the end of each part I do offer some follow-up activities at home with the idea that people can share, that they can bring in their work that they've done at home and share it the next day if they want, and often that will inspire some different work to actually happen later. Okay, so I guess we can end the web tour now. Oh, perfect. Thanks. Okay. So kind of thinking about this and thinking about what you've just seen and stuff that you're already doing within your classroom, I'd love to know if you could use the text tool and just share ideas in the box about how you currently document your learning, or sorry, student learning, I should say.
I'll just jump on and make sure everybody knows how to find and use the text tool. So the little tool strip on the left-hand side of your whiteboard, the fourth one down is your text tool, and you can select the text box or click on the little black triangle and you'll see the plain text tool that'll just type straight across the screen and might be a little bit simpler. If you have any problems with that, just go ahead and share in the chat.
And for whoever wrote down iPad, I was just wondering, or even iPhone, what you use to actually document the learning. Like, are you taking pictures? Are you taking videos? Are you writing down text? Are you doing a combination? I know many people use like PicCollage or one of those apps as well, but I was just curious. Sketch. Okay. Google Drive. Perfect. Oh, I do love blogging too, for whoever wrote down about the blogging piece. Okay. Evernote is a great tool as well. I use that one quite a bit too. Anecdotal checklist. It's neat to see the use of tools that are digital but also non-digital tools as well. Awesome. Yeah. I think sometimes those non-digital tools work well too. What I happen to like about the use of technology is that we can easily take a photograph of those paper notes that we've written or the stuff that we've put on clipboards and hold on to it so that we don't have to worry about holding on to all the paper. I guess it depends on the person. For me, myself and paper, it never seems to go well, but if I can take a photograph of that paper, then sometimes the paper is easier to write on, and then at least I have a copy of that one for afterwards too. Okay, so it certainly seems like there's a whole bunch of actually different apps and digital and non-digital tools that people are using to document student learning, which is awesome. I'm hoping that as the presentation goes on, we're still kind of near the beginning of it, that people will share in the chat box or share through some of the other text tool stuff that we do, some of the different ways that you do document the learning, or some other ideas that you have that you can see it working in the classroom, so that we can all kind of learn from each other here as well. Okay, so I'm now going to move on to a few different options. So now that we've discussed some stuff, I'm going to share some of the different ways that I've used in a few different grades. So there's kind of a range here. So the first one was with regards to tweeting, which I mentioned that I do. And I usually, even though I do have class accounts, I usually use my professional account for tweeting. So this is an example from last year when I was doing kindergarten prep coverage. And one of the bonuses of tweets is that we can take a photograph, which is exactly what I did here, but also write down exactly what the students say, so we have a record of what's being shared. So in this case, I had brought down these GeoMetro tools that students can use to build with, and we had read some stories about building. They were kind of excited about how to put some things together, and then they started experimenting with it. So this student in particular was really excited when he found out that a box is strong enough to carry his water bottle, or to hold his water bottle, and he could do so without it dropping over. So I was able to kind of capture that piece to see that he kind of has an understanding about not only how to create the box, but about the fact that the box does hold some strength and that it can carry things. And then we were able to have a discussion and kind of extend that learning in terms of other things that the box may be able to hold, as well as some things that the box may not be able to hold, so that we can not only look at what the students are currently sharing, but also use that information to then figure out kind of where to go next. Okay, so Tom, I noticed you were saying that you're having a hard time tweeting during the day, and with pictures, blurring faces takes some time. Yeah, okay, so first of all, in my situation, all except for one student, I'm able to actually tweet out pictures of their face. So our the form that the parents sign allows for it, and I've spoken to parents about it. So all except for one student, that's not an issue. So that does make things a little easier because I'm not as worried about trying to blur faces. Sometimes what I often tend to do is I try to take a picture when I notice something that's of interest, and then I put the iPad down, kind of have a conversation with the student about what's happening, and then quickly try to type it in so that I can still kind of be with the student but quickly type it in as I'm going. If blurring the faces makes it a little more difficult, as I can imagine it would, because you've got to take the picture not within the app itself, but separately. I might even suggest trying to cut out the face by either taking a picture of what's happening kind of over top. I try to take some photos of hands and stuff, or just of the work samples that are happening, so that I don't have to worry about trying to blur things out or put some somewhere else first. I know that some people like to use PicCollage then, because what they can do is they can insert the picture, type in the text as it's happening, and then at the end go back and add, sometimes people even add stickers and stuff right over top of the faces, and then you can tweet out that completed PicCollage. So instead of trying to tweet the individual things that are happening, now you've got a chance to capture what's being said, capture the picture, go back at the end, add in or blur the faces, and then still share it so other people can see it as well. So I hope that helps. In this case, this was something, same kind of thing happening, but with an older grade. So I had actually had some students away on this particular day, and we had a bit of a building challenge that involved, some counting that was happening, some sorting that was happening, some patterning. It was kind of a combination of many different things, as well as creating of different shapes. And it was interesting to capture some of the discussions that were happening, because having that marshmallow and spaghetti everywhere did seem to lead to some very interesting discussions. So again, I can put, and what I try to do is put in quotation marks on stuff that's being said directly from the student versus when I'm the one who's actually writing down the information or making observations about it, because then that tells myself afterwards, or tells me afterwards, what part was actually shared by the students and what part was shared by me. And then what I attempt to do is, as I'm actually sending out the tweets, or if not then a little bit later on in the day, I try to look back through what was shared and then use that as a way to figure out, okay, what do the students already know and where do they go next? Because I think that's the important part that comes with documentation, is it's not just documenting what the students are doing, but why does that matter? So if the kids can do this, then where is a good spot for us to go afterwards? Or if they're struggling, then what might we consider doing to kind of help bridge that gap? So in addition to that, the idea of photographing, or the idea of photographs works really well. And in my grade 1 class in particular, I found that because of some various student needs, because of some skills that they need to develop, a lot of students are using pens, pencils, markers, paper. But even though they're using those non-digital tools, which is what we were discussing as people were sharing some of the ways that they document learning, even though we're using the non-digital tools, it's so easy to capture that learning with the use of a picture. So in this particular case, I took a photograph of what one of my students had done. You'll see in my photos, I often use initials, which I did here, and then I was able to not only share the picture, but in this case also share a little bit of the information about the growth of this particular student. So at the beginning of the year in September, this student would not write me anything, like not even a single letter down on the paper. He was struggling with his 4-letter name, and he didn't want to write me anything. So now we're at the end of October, and this is what he's written me on his own. So not only could I take a picture of that, but I could actually look back and see how much has actually happened, how much growth there's been. And for me, this is important, but I think it was also important because we were sitting at a staff meeting earlier in the year, and our principal had made a comment about, what he wants to know is, how do we know that learning is happening? And when we're not necessarily using traditional ways of finding out about learning, like if we're not going to be doing a bunch of tests or maybe even handing out a bunch of bigger assignments, then how are we figuring out what the students do know? And so in this particular case, being able to look back and have that documentation of the picture of the work that the student did back on the first day of school in September, and then seeing what the student's doing now, shows me that the students are learning, because you're able to see the growth in that particular child. And I know that this happens a lot in kindergarten classes, because they are kind of taking those pictures, holding on to that portfolio of student work, and they're able to go back and then have the look at what students are doing and how much they have grown. And what I try to do is something that I written down here, but I often try to link the tweet back to what the curriculum expectation is. So in this particular case, I had written about what he wasn't doing before versus what he was. But you'll see that many of the tweets, I'll write things about using familiar words and letter sounds, or writing using different forms, or generating ideas. So what I attempt to do is give parents and give other teachers a bit of a context for what's happening within the classroom and where that learning is. And Barb and Sharon, it's funny that you said that about taking the photos of their work because they do want to take it home. And it's so true. Even in my grade 1 class now, I notice a lot of the students want to take it home. So before they take it home, they either need to take a photograph of their work, or they need me to take a photograph of the work. And then that way, I still have a copy of the work, even if they are taking it home, which I think does hold definitely a lot of value. So then, in addition to that, along with the pictures, we do try to take a bunch of videos. And sometimes our videos are done in a small group situation, and sometimes they're done as part of a learning, at the end, like in a math congress, or in some kind of literacy discussion, or for science or social studies. So this is a particular video that was done as we were trying to count some coins after a Play-Doh store that we had done. So the students actually figured out that the kindergarten class wanted Play-Doh, they liked using it, and that they had run out. So what they did is we kind of did it as a whole project-based learning math language type of activity that happened. And so my students decided on surveying the different kindergarten classes. There were 6 of them, and they surveyed to find out the colors of the Play-Doh that they might be interested in. And then based on those color choices, we picked 6 different colors of Play-Doh to make. And then they followed the instructions and did the measurement to actually make the Play-Doh. They broke the Play-Doh apart into different sized bags, and then they charged either 5 cents, 10 cents, or $1 for the bags of Play-Doh based on the size of the bag. So they decided on what seemed reasonable based on the size. And what I did is I gave the kindergarten classes some pretend money, and they went and they paid for the Play-Doh. So once they had paid for the Play-Doh, then we had to look at how we could count the different money amounts. And the idea was to practice counting by 5s, by 10s, by 1s. Some people had even given us $2, so to practice counting by 2s as well. So we could kind of get that skip counting, which was an expectation for grade 1, as well as joining with one of their interests, which was also on Play-Doh, as well as on making connections with the kindergarten students. So this is a short video where this student explains about how we should count. Okay. Yes, it was the one picture of counting money. So we're just picking up the video here. It's not very long. One.
Aviva, I did turn your microphone off for a second because I could hear your video playing just in case you're talking.
Thanks.
Everybody's
There we go.
probably
Okay.
done. I'm going to switch it back to the whiteboard.
That's awesome. Thank you. Okay, so just to give a little bit of context here, before this student had recorded this video, another student suggested that we count the coins, and we actually recorded a video of this, where she counted the coins by lining them up, and she counted the number of coins that we had, which I think turned into something like 16 coins. But what this student decided is even though there were 16 coins, that doesn't mean we have 16 cents or $16, that each of the coins holds a different value. And so what we actually did from her video is the students decided to actually sort the coins, and then once it was sorted, to add up the different amounts, and then we worked together to add up the final amount. So they could see that even though there's a set number of coins, that each of those ones have a different value. This particular video, though, allowed me to capture one student's thinking process, I guess, to solve this problem, but that she could actually look beyond just the number of coins that were there, but that she started to understand the concept of the value of those particular coins. Now, in this case, this is a use of a podcast. So what we did is we had decided that we are making an art gallery, a number art gallery, and inviting some classes to come and see it, where the students have created a piece of art that matches up to math concepts. And they're also going to be creating a music piece that aligns with their piece of art. And other classes are going to get a chance to come in and see what's happened and see what the students have done, but also let other students explain what's been happening. So we were going to be creating the pieces of art for this math art gallery. And I gave the students some different choices of materials that they could use for their art piece. So we decided on cut and paste, clay, paper and markers, and paint. And so the students each had to decide on which one they would do, and we basically graphed it on the carpet. And then the students at the end reflected on the graph results, not only talking about what they noticed in terms of total numbers, but in terms of why there may have been more or less in a particular one. And we just used a podcasting tool on here, a voice recorder app for the iPad, and recorded the discussion that happened, and then I was able to tweet out the picture of it as well as the discussion. So that, I mean, here what you get is you can hear what each of the students is able to contribute in terms of the results, but you can also hear who's kind of pushing the conversation forward, who has a better understanding of the math concepts, who's kind of repeating some of what's been said before, who's able to use the data and make some inferences in terms of why the results may have been as they were. Now, I think this podcast is a little bit longer, so I don't know if we want to watch all of it. But Louise, if you wanted to bring it up, we could probably listen to the first couple of minutes.
I'll pop a timer on for 2 minutes then, and when we hear that ding, everybody can come on back out.
Perfect.
Here it comes.
Mine stopped here. Did anyone else's stop? Okay. I don't know. Hold on. Let me see if I can get out of the web tour. Yeah, there was no picture. There is just voice because it is just the one. Okay. Yeah, I guess it stopped playing in my web tour part. Perfect. Okay. Perfect. Thanks. Okay, so the way that podcasting tool works is, yeah, when it uploads, you just get the voice. You don't get a picture because it's not actually doing a video. So I am just basically recording on a podcasting tool, but it's one that allows me to upload to YouTube later. Or I can save it to my camera roll, and our board actually has a capture tool that we can use to upload it that takes away the advertisements at the end of YouTube. So I can also upload it that way as well. But you don't get an image, you just get the audio piece that comes with it. Again, though, what's neat about, I think, doing podcasts, and I do tend to record quite a few of them. In fact, I tend to record them basically all day long when we're sharing things as a group, is that you get to hear what each of the students say, and I can do it without having to worry about the technology piece. Earlier on, when Tom had mentioned about trying to get the pictures in and, you know, when to find time to tweet it out or how to find the time to do that, it becomes a lot harder when you're trying to write down everything that students are saying or doing, because you're kind of focused on the tool that's in front of you as well as the kids, as well as what's happening around you, and it's kind of difficult to balance it all. But what I love about the podcaster is that I can just click on record, I can set it off to the side, and I don't have to worry about it. I never need to look back on it. I can be with the kids. I can be involved with them. If I decide later that I don't want to share all of it, I don't have to. I can edit it just on my camera roll and make it a little bit shorter if I want, or share it in little chunks if I want. And then I can just tweet that piece out after when I have a chance, and I've managed to capture what everyone said. And I also kind of have an idea of, okay, based on what they've said, where might we be able to go next? Screencasts are much like podcasts as well. And I've done screencasting in different ways before. This particular example is one from Explain Everything. So what the student did is I found this online basic or not online app that students could use to build with blocks. It was called Build with Blocks, actually, and I had them do the one that was connected to the shapes. So there's squares, there's rectangles, there's some different shapes that are there. And so they built with it and kind of looked at how they could create with the blocks and how they could create with the different shapes. And some students did it on the iPad. Other people used some actual shapes and made pictures on the floor. Some people used some different blocks that they created with. Some people used an online shape tool that they could do on the computer, so we could do that option as well. So there were kind of varied things. After they made the one on Build with Shapes, I had them take a screenshot of it, and then we used Explain Everything. My school right now is part of this Transforming Learning Everywhere project for our board, which basically gives all students in grades 4 to 8 at the school a one-to-one iPad. I teach down in grade 1, so I don't have a one-to-one iPad, although I do have iPads to use as part of the classroom. But one of the bonuses of being part of this school, in addition to other things, is that we have access to Explain Everything, which the board has put on the image for these iPads. So Explain Everything is a screencasting tool that allows you to upload photographs, videos, and then kind of comment over top of them as well. So what I did is I had the student insert the photo, and then you can hear the discussion that happened as part of it. So the video is 2 minutes and 15 seconds, and I'm thinking that we'll try to listen to it as if we can with the link, Louise. Awesome. Perfect. So if people want to click on it or watch the sharing one, they can. This is an actual video.
Okay, so tell me about your picture. Can you, if you click on the little pen, you can circle some of the
Okay, so if Louise, if you could just end the web tour when you have a chance, that's awesome. Thanks. So, one of the explain everything is certainly a great option for screencasting, and as you can hear in that particular example, I mean there were other students around me that were talking as well, so you could kind of hear them in the background. Although I was having a discussion with one particular student as she was highlighting some information and sharing some shape stuff on hers. Now, Snagit is another way to take a screencast. It works on a computer, and this was a screencast that we had done when we were talking about some shapes and things in abstract art. So basically, I think Snagit you usually pay for it. I was able to get one through our board, so it was a little bit different. But I could basically take a screenshot of the page and record a video over top of it. So you could see the image that was on the page as well as hear the video that was over top of it. Maybe what we'll do, I think this video might be a little bit longer. I don't know if you wanted to put it in. It's a little different because you can hear my conversation with the whole class. So maybe we could just look at a portion of the video. Perfect. Yeah, so maybe we'll just do like 2 minutes. Perfect. Perfect. So, and it does, that particular video does go on for a couple minutes, and they start to talk a little bit about the attributes of the different shapes, and then we looked at how artists can use the shapes in it. With the screencast, though, you can see the students that are actually outlining it on, and they actually did that on the smartboards. You can see them outlining the different shapes that are there, but then you can also hear their dialogue about it. So if I'm listening back, I can see if they can identify as well as if they can talk about it. Yeah, it was kind of used there. So it was a little bit of a cliffhanger there. I was just interested now in knowing, how do you get students involved in documenting their learning? Because the next piece, a lot of this has been done with us doing the documentation. I'd love to know how the students document some of their own learning. So if you could use the text tool and add some ideas into the box, or if it's hard to add it into the box, if you want to add it into the chat window, you can do that as well. I love Twitter and blogging. Right about it. Okay. It looks like people are just about done, I guess, sharing their options. So I'm hoping kind of as the next set of slides talks a little bit about some different ways that students can be involved in documenting their own learning. Some of the ideas that are here are ones that you'll see some photographs of and some information about, and some of them are not. So if you have some other ideas to add, if you want to explain how you use some of these tools in the classroom, or if you want to, even though some of these tools are actually discussed in the next couple of slides, you may use them in different ways with your students or in other ways with your students, please feel free to add that information into the chat box window so that we can kind of exchange some different ideas too. Okay, so one of the examples here is using PicCollage, and this is an example in a kindergarten classroom. This is not my classroom. Jocelyn Schmidt, and I gave her Twitter name here, is a full-day kindergarten teacher in York Region. She does some incredible things. I would totally recommend her blog. In fact, I had some people in visiting the classroom today, and I suggested the same thing to those teachers as well. And she does document a lot of the ways that she uses inquiry with her students, and she kind of goes through the process, which I love. This particular case is really neat because she shows examples of how she gets the students to use PicCollage to document their own learning. And you'll see in these examples, these are the students. So you'll see them adding photos, you'll see them starting to type in the text to explain what they've done, and I guess depending on the skills, needs, abilities of your students, you could kind of add the text piece in various ways. I've used it with my grade 1s, and for some of them who are just learning how to write, some of them have just maybe taken some photos of things that start with a particular letter and might just be writing in the first letter or the first couple of letters in it, where other students might be writing full sentences or trying to explain why this connects to the certain topic. So again, it could vary kind of depending on the students. And thank you, Louise, for putting in those links as well. But I would certainly suggest having a look at this blog post, and also looking at how she uses PicCollage to connect with the daily goals, so that the students are using it and being very aware of what they're doing and why they're sharing and how they're sharing, which I think is a great option, not just for kindergarten, but for students of any age. I could certainly see using the same concept with students maybe up into even the junior intermediate grades as well. So that being said, here's an example of using PicCollage in grade 5. So what we had done is my students were learning about energy use as part of grade 5 last year, and so they had been doing some reading and and writing on energy and kind of sharing what they had learned and doing some application. And these two students, they took the work that they had done on chart paper and they took some photographs of their work and they made it into a PicCollage that they then tweeted from my class account last year so that you could actually see their thinking, and they were able to document it and share their learning on energy use. But because they also shared it through Twitter, give an option for other people to comment back and share their own thinking on it, which I think just kind of pushes it to that next level. So it's not that it's just documenting, it's them documenting it, but when you can somehow get them to share their learning using social media, one of the values is that you're opening it up for other people to be able to comment back and extend that learning. So not just me, but people that have more to share. And this is another example of grade 5, and this was it was part of a math activity that we had done, and it was related to volume, and they actually decorated it, and it connected to one of our science inquiries. But we actually sent a teapot box with a teapot, and we had received one from a class in Hawaii, and in Japan, and we sent it off to a class in Australia. So what they did is that they had done a little miniature version of the teapot box, and we were going to vote on the one to create a larger version of it. We were working on proportional reasoning as well, so create a larger version of it to send off the teapot box. So these two students, they made a PicCollage showing their different faces and then talking about the shapes and the angles and things that they had used and how they knew that that they were correct in what they had said. So yes, we know that we made a prism because of this, and a pyramid, because of this, and 2D shapes, etc. So they were actually able to discuss it and write it out and then share it. So they were able to make really quite an easy media text, but also be able to share some of their thinking for when we were able to actually vote on the box that we would send out with our teapot in it. Now, another way is blogging, and I know somebody else mentioned the idea of Kid Blog, which I've used before and do definitely love. Our board actually has our own blogging platform, thanks to Jared Bennett and the 21st Century Learning team. They've created the Commons that allows not just teachers and principals, administrators to blog, but also allows students as well. So I've used the Commons with students as young as grade 1 and all the way up with students as old as grade 6. And I also have my professional and class blog through the Commons, as well. So this is an example from one of my student blogs from grade 1 a number of years ago. As you can see, it was in 2012, but they were talking about the butterfly life cycle, and you can click on the link if you'd like to kind of have a look at it. I won't do a web tour of it, but the reason I chose this particular one is because it shows that in this case, the student just uploaded a photograph of the work that she had actually written in her journal, discussing how the butterfly goes through its life cycle. And in other examples, you'll see that students actually typed it out. And that's one of the neat things about blogs, is that there's many different ways that we can share. So you don't necessarily need to have a one-to-one computer or an iPad for everybody to make the blogging work. Students can still be writing on the paper or sharing in pictures or sharing as part of a comic strip, and just with a photograph or a video, you're able to actually share it on the blog. And again, this was done with students as young as grade 1, and I know from people who mentioned blogging as well that they're also doing it with the young students too, which I think is awesome. Now, this is an example of a grade 5 blog, and you'll see that in this example, the student actually typed it in, and it is a student who does have quite a bit of voice in her writing, regardless of what she shares or how she shares. And this was actually a reflection after our unit on energy. So after students had kind of shared their learning on energy use and had done a lot of reading and inquiry related to it, this particular student decided to reflect on it in a blog. I had given them some reflection questions that I wanted them to answer, and they could choose how they wished to do so. She thought that this way other people could choose to comment if they wanted. So again, I'm not going to do a web tour of it, but I do know that Louise put the link in it, and you can certainly have a look. You can see from her starting point, she does like to add a little bit of voice, but she chose to blog with the questions and then her answers and information underneath. And then at the end, she also chose to add a question to, again, try to stimulate a little bit of discussion on the topic, which is something I try to teach students regardless of age when they are blogging, because not only can they share their learning that's happening, but they can extend that learning through the questions that they ask. And this is a different example. So this was an example of a grade 5 student who blogged. A different student, she blogged on the fact that math was everywhere. And she has quite an interesting voice in her writing as well. What I liked about this one, and the reason I put it in with the link to the comments, is because, as I said before, I think blogs are great because students can document their learning on it. But the reason I really like them is that the comments can help stimulate further conversation. And so it's not just the fact that they can share what they're learning, but other people can reflect and kind of push that learning forward or make people realize that what they're sharing is of value. Yes, when I did grade 1 before, my students did add comments to each other's blogs. We talked about what kinds of comments would be appropriate ones to add. Some of my grade 5s and 6s also commented. I found I kind of played with how I use blogs in grade 5 and 6. We also have Google Apps for Ed as well as part of our board. And some students, and our blogging platform also includes kind of a private blogging area as well. So some students decided that they really wanted an opportunity to share publicly their work, while other students decided that they felt more comfortable kind of sharing it with me or sharing it with a few other people in the classroom, but not necessarily sharing it with everyone. So not everybody did blog, or if they did, not everybody blogged regularly, so they didn't necessarily comment in the same ways. Oh, thanks, Louise. Thanks for adding some comments to the student blogs. I know my students really do love getting them. In this case, and the reason I put it down was because when the student had blogged on this particular topic on math, I happened to have tweeted the link to the blog post, not just out, but I tweeted it to my principal and vice principal at the time, who were also on Twitter. Well, within a couple minutes, the principal had read this, and he responded to her with a comment. So what she found really neat was not just the fact that she could write down her learning and share some of her ideas, but the fact that she knew that the principal was interested in what she had to say and chose to comment back. And as soon as she came in from recess, I mentioned that he had commented to her, and she got really excited, and she went on to approve the comment so that she could talk to him about what he had written as well. So it is neat that it does kind of allow for that communication to happen afterwards. I totally agree. I think it's really important that they know that what they're sharing has value. The video recordings that I've done up to this point were ones that I was the one doing the recording of the video. When I was teaching grade 1 the last time, or 1-2 split, I also had flip cameras, which I actually still own and happen to love, even though you can't buy them anywhere anymore. But they are so easy to record video. They may even be easier than an iPad. They just kind of suck up battery life. But what I did in this particular case is I had a couple of flip cams, and students kind of went around and they discussed their learning on 3-dimensional solids. And one of the neat things about the discussions was, if I had had the students do the writing piece or even just talk to me, I may not have kind of captured all of that learning. But in this particular case, you can hear all of the student thinking, if it's right, wrong, or somewhere in between, and you're able to actually have that copy of it to then listen back and realize, okay, here's where we need to go next. And even when I can't be there to hear what the student's saying, because you know what, you're always trying to kind of pop around to everybody and hear the discussions that are happening, but you're going to miss something. The fact that students can kind of record their own videos to document their learning means that you don't have to worry that you can't be everywhere all at the same time, because now you're allowing the students to kind of take control of that. Now, I really like this video. I think it is a little bit longer, but I'm wondering if we can do a web tour of it and see, even if we can only watch a couple minutes of it. It is a really interesting one. And there are a few of them here. I'd suggest that we just maybe have a look. I'll maybe just look through. I guess each of you are going to need to click on your own ones at this point. So maybe you can, so maybe what you can do is just play the first video and have a look at it. It's just about 25 seconds. Okay. And what I'll do is I won't have us listen to all of them. You can actually go back and you can, if you're interested, you can go back and hear each of them, and he goes through each of the different ones and talks a little bit about their attributes and stuff. But maybe we'll end the web tour now, just being kind of cognizant of the time and the number of slides left. But if people do want to go back after and watch some of them, they can, and you can see how he was able to just use that flip cam and talk about what he knew about these different 3D figures. Now, this was another one. This happened to be one on multiplication in grade 2, and this student is discussing some of her learning about multiplication. Being kind of aware of the time, I'm not going to play this particular video, but again, you can see it is a longer video, but what the student actually did is they were able to just use the video camera to record what their discussion was, and even when they couldn't write down the information that was there or share all their details in writing, you were still able to hear and see what their thinking was, which I think is so important when we are really trying to capture that thinking. Okay, and then this is a different one. It was a video recording from 2 of my grade 5 students. In grade 5 for science, we were creating organ systems. And so these students are discussing what they knew about their particular organ system, and as well as talking about their plan on how they're going to create it. They were making the nervous system, so they talked about how they were going to create the nervous system, what they were going to do, and they showed you, in addition to kind of discussing it, they showed the research and stuff that they had done. So you can hear their discussion to extend on it. You can hear the thinking behind the choices that they're making, but you can also see the work that they had actually done. And they did all of this recording themselves. They were able to set it up as a way to kind of extend it. And in fact, the 2 of them had asked if they could go and record it because they had done their initial plan and they wanted a chance to kind of expand on it. And that's where I think then documenting their learning can be good, is that it doesn't even necessarily, something like a video recording doesn't necessarily need to be for everybody, but it can be an option for those students that want an opportunity to kind of expand on what they were thinking. I'm not, again, this is a longer one, so I'm not going to play it for now, but if you do want to go back and watch it, it is kind of an interesting one because of how they put everything else together. Okay, so then in addition to it, there's also the option of tweeting. And I know that somebody else mentioned that they do tweet with their students too. And I know a lot of you here are in the primary grade, so this is good. So it means that people are tweeting with their primary students as well. What I used to do is the last time I taught grade 1 and grade 2, I had a couple different Twitter accounts, and it was the ones that were here, but they were different names at the time. And what I did is I used to come up with different hashtags based on us sharing on a variety of different topics. And so what students would do is they would compose tweets either on their own or with someone else and add the hashtag as a way to kind of sort and gather that information, but also reply to what other people had done. And in grade 1 and 2, because I was teaching a split class at the time, what I did is I tried to come up with a hashtag that was slightly different for both of the grades that would kind of connect to what they were learning, usually in science or social studies, but connected to our language block as well. So the link is at the bottom there, and we don't have to go to the link right now, but what you can see if you were to click on it is you can see a story including all of the different tweets that the people had shared and how they kind of what the topics were that they had talked about. And the neat thing looking back is that you can see what the students are thinking and maybe what they're not thinking or sharing, so you know where your instruction needs to go next. Past when I had done this, I used to get the students to make sure that they added in either their initial or their first name with their tweets so that I can make sure that I knew who was sharing what, and that way I could also see who knew what and who didn't know something, so I knew what I needed to go back and add to later. And just like tweeting with grade 1s and 2s, I also tweeted with my grade 5s. Often my grade 5s and 6s would share screenshots or photographs of the work that they had done through our class Twitter accounts. So because they were finding that they needed to share more than what you could kind of capture in 140 characters. But sometimes they did share their thinking just in the 140 characters. And you can see here that they did, in this case, share a little bit of their thinking. And this one actually was, surprisingly, was on our government unit, which I just said before we started here would have been a great unit to do at this time of the year right now with grade 5s. But what they had done is the students had gone into groups and they had talked about their various solutions to different problems. So they picked a problem that was important to them and then started to discuss their solutions. And the idea is that they were trying to get us as a class government to pass a bill allowing them to put their solution into place. So they needed to challenge each other's solutions to come up with the one that would be kind of the best one for us to support. And they were on different topics, but we could only support up to so many different bills. So we had to vote on the ones that we thought would be the best ones to support based on the information that was shared. And then what we did is I had students use Twitter to basically try to capture little sound bites of the discussions that were happening in the classroom. So in addition to maybe us recording or podcasting some of those discussions or taking videos of some of the things that were being shared, the students could also be listening to what other people were sharing and trying to capture some of that information on Twitter. Again, this was something I think that probably worked a little bit better with a slightly older class, and I was teaching grade 5 at the time. But I have had students try to share learning, even when I taught grade 1 and 2, did it on when we had a Skype call from an expert who was talking about butterflies. They shared their learning in little sound bites using Twitter as well. So it is possible with the younger grades, just would look or sound a little bit different. And then here I talked a little bit about tweets of screenshots. And I said this was something that the grade 5s tended to do often because it was a lot harder for them to put all of their information into 140 characters. So it was easier for them to share all their thinking this way. And again, this one was a way for him to share with me some of the learning and thinking he had done. for related to the issue of government and some of the government issues that were going on. Barb and Sharon, I noticed you mentioned that some K teachers tweet on behalf of their students. And right now I'd say I'm doing the same thing with my grade ones. They might share with me what they wanted to say, and I would be the one who sends it out. So many of the tweets that I send will come where it's they're kind of talking, but I'm the one sending it out. I've got a few students right now who will sometimes try to add some of their own tweets. I might pass over the iPad and get them to add maybe a sentence or two sharing their learning, but it's just for a couple students at this point, and I'm kind of hoping as the year goes on that they can document a little bit more and share a little bit more with the use of their tweets too. Maybe that's like the little scaffolding piece depending on where the students are at. And this was something I spoke about before, but I do think it's something important to consider, which is the use of initials. I like to know who shared what, but I'm also cognizant that if they're tweeting things out that it is being shared in kind of a public realm, so I don't necessarily want them to be writing their whole name on there. I have sometimes let students write their first names, but again, those take up a lot of characters if they only have a few to share. So often I've done students to write down their initials, and I know who's sharing what, but at the same time, to everybody else, they're not really known. Parents that were following along with our Twitter account started to kind of learn the initials of who their son or daughter was so that they could see what their son or daughter was sharing. And so then it became meaningful for them, but they didn't have to worry about everybody else knowing who they were. And you can see here again the screenshot that goes with the tweet that the person had shared. So then our next little part in this, and I guess our final little part, is how do you use documentation to determine next steps? So now that you've kind of taken down that documentation and you've gathered all this evidence, how do you use that to kind of determine where you're going next? If you wanted to use the text tool and share some ideas in the box, or if not, if you wanted to type some in the chat window, maybe you could do that. Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. Okay, so I think just a few more people are adding in information right now. Yeah, I would probably add a little check mark too on deciding on groupings for reteaching, moving to next steps, or also looking for gaps in the learning as well. Pair kids. For me, I think the key is that we can take in all of this documentation. And sometimes it seems like we're taking a lot between the photographs, the videos, the tweets, the anecdotals, the checklists. It seems like we're getting a lot of information in. So the question is, what do we want to do with all of this information? How is it valuable to us, and how are we going to use it to determine where we need to go next? And I've kind of played with this year to year in terms of ways that work best. I used to kind of reflect at the end of the week, but now I'm finding, and maybe it's because of a younger grade, maybe it's because of where my students are at, I'm finding that I really need to look kind of day by day. So really going back and seeing, okay, based on what I've kind of gathered today, here is what my students already know, and based on this, here is where I really need to go next, even though I thought that I might be at a slightly different point, which, I mean, I'm going to admit, and probably the first one to admit it, I am very hyper organized. I like to be organized. I like to be planned. I like to know what's going to happen next. I'm not big on surprises, and so it's hard for me because I do try to plan kind of a week at a time, and often based on what the students are sharing, I find that it changes, so that I constantly am kind of retweaking my plans for the week based on the documentation that I've collected and that the students have shared with me. So this is an example. So this particular example is one from grade 1 and 2, and we were working on butterflies. We had some butterflies in the classroom, and so we decided to have a butterfly chat to share what students knew about butterflies, any questions that they had about butterflies. And you can kind of see their thoughts there. I spy kindergarten, so you can also see that somebody else kind of added to our Twitter chat as well with some of their thinking too. And so after we had shared this learning, then kind of comes that piece of analyzing the tweets. So it's not that I write all this down, but it is kind of what goes through my head. So it's thinking about, what do the students know? And I could go back and see, okay, they did know some basic information on butterflies. They knew how to ask questions related to the content shared, but what do they still need to learn? They need to learn some more detailed information. So they might know kind of the specifics, the overall stuff, but they need to know a few more details, and they need to know how to ask deeper questions because many of the questions were yes/no ones. So I need to work on some questioning skills, which right now, as we kind of move towards inquiry, is something that I think seems to be kind of a never-ending focus. But at least by analyzing it, I was able to then figure out kind of the mini lessons of where to go next. This is another particular case, and it's one related to math learning. So this year, I wanted the students, because we had just done this whole Play-Doh store, this big project-based learning thing related to math, and we incorporated all of these different areas, and afterwards, and by the way, Dorothy, I really like your idea of the KWL chart. It's true. That's exactly what it's kind of like. Never really thought of that before, but I love that. In this particular case, I wanted them to really kind of link what we had just done, this big project, in terms of what they'd learned related to math. So I thought, okay, it might be easier for them to make those connections at the end if we could come up with an idea of what is math. So I asked them the question of what is math, which was a question that Matthew Oldridge, who works for the Peel Board, he had actually started a Twitter kind of chat on the same thing with students sharing some information. And so we made this web together. First of all, I did not expect it to be as difficult as it was to make the web sharing what math was. A lot of the students could not seem to get beyond the fact that math was a pattern. Some of them got to the idea of numbers and counting, but it really was difficult to get past that. As you can see there, at the time there was nothing related to geometry on there at all. Nobody even thought about shapes. So it was it seemed to be really difficult. And even in grade 1, oh, and thanks Louise for putting down that Twitter handle, even in grade 1, the students almost had like a textbook definition of it. So it was then, based on what I learned, that I had blogged, and this is a link to a professional blog post where I spoke about the need that maybe if I wanted students to see beyond that textbook definition, then I needed to start with the real world. And so based on that, I decided to make some changes to how I was going to teach math. So I blogged about kind of my new plan on how I was going to teach math. And I won't go through the whole blog post with you, but it did speak a little bit more about making some more meaningful links to it, explicitly stating it, trying to use learning goals and some success criteria. I'll admit at this point, we seem to be more in kind of the learning goal phase than exactly the success criteria, although we have kind of looked at some of the process expectations related to math, so that the students are really starting to see themselves as mathematicians, but also starting to realize what it is explicitly that they're learning and why it matters that they're learning it. And so it's kind of with that I kind of looked at, we also need to identify math when we are teaching it. Yes, Barb and Sharon, that's so important. That actually came out, I don't know if it came out in that blog post, but it was something that I had thought about afterwards in terms of really kind of stating it. It's because I think it's that we know that we're teaching it, or we know that we're addressing it, but the students don't necessarily know that. And we do that think aloud piece for reading and writing, but I don't know that we always do it for math, or at least I don't know that I always did it for math. So I do find myself kind of doing that piece a little bit more now to make students a little more aware. And I will admit that since I did that blog post and since we've made some changes, students are moving forward in it. My math program is certainly something I continue to tweak, but it is something that's starting to come along, which is good. It makes me feel a lot happier than before. And I think it was probably that documentation piece that helped with it. Because if I hadn't kind of looked back or listened to it or gotten some feedback from students in terms of where they were at, I don't know that I would have made the changes to the math program that I did. So because everyone kind of seemed happy with it, but the question was, where are they learning? And that's where I think the documentation piece becomes so important. It's not just about the happiness, it's where you're learning. Family in the car. That's a good example there, Louise. Yeah, it's that same piece. Definitely the idea of having to kind of explicitly state that and tell the students that and not make it a secret in terms of where that learning is. So then the question becomes, okay, so getting started, what can we do? So one of the things I would suggest for sure is getting a device if you can and trying to keep it with you. You don't necessarily need a ton of them, but having something with you to always record, document, write stuff down, take a picture, record a video certainly helps. And then definitely taking photographs of the student work. Even if you take the photograph, put it down, and then start talking to the students about it, you can either get them to write the tweet or you can write the tweet based on what they've shared. I spoke before about podcasts and video discussions. I happen to like the podcast because the device can just sit down and I don't need to worry too much about it. I know that it's recording and I can just kind of be in the moment with students. If not, sometimes I find that I get so kind of hooked up in what I'm trying to write or say that you kind of lose that connection with the students. And again, I went through the idea of taking a photograph and writing down what they say. I think the next big piece is the storifying piece. Once you've got all these pictures, what do they mean? I think Storify allows you to give a context, but also allows you to provide that extension for parents at home. I don't think that kids necessarily go home and explain to parents what they're doing during the day. And even if they do, even if parents want to be able to help them, I don't know that they necessarily know, okay, what should I do? What kind of prompts can I ask to get some discussion happening? And there's always big discussions that kind of happen over the concept of homework. And should we have homework? Should we not have homework? How much is too much? So what I kind of like about the prompts is that it provides that homework for parents that want it. It's not required that kids do it, but it gives them the extension of something meaningful that they can do at home that connects to what they're learning or sharing in the classroom, that goes with kind of that next step of where we're looking at, gives parents the options of homework, but it's not required, and at least it's meaningful. And if parents are asking for homework, it's something that's there. So Mr. So Classroom, who's Jonathan So, and he shares his Storify stories through Twitter at the end of every day in his grade 2 classroom. He does, in particular, some amazing things with math, along with Matthew Aldridge as well, but he does do some incredible things, especially with math. And his teaching partner, Carrie Ewert, is also on Twitter as well, and she's actually running a project right now looking at the use of iPads and kind of the connection between iPads and higher order thinking, and she looks at some of the stuff with the Daily 5, and she also documents some learning through Twitter too. So the two of them are fantastic. I suggested this one for Storify because Jonathan does Storify it and share it, so it's a good option for you to see what he does and how he does it. Okay, so with that in mind, I'm hoping that there might be something new that you've learned tonight that you're hoping to try. And I left this one kind of towards the end here because I always like knowing after I've been to some kind of workshop, or in this case, like all of you have invested an hour and a half in here, I'd like to know that you've got something new to try. So if you wanted to take the text tool, maybe you could write down something that you might consider trying or looking at after tonight's webinar. Storify is a great one. Recommend it for sure. Going in. This one. Okay. Podcast. Podcasts are one of my favorites, so for whoever said that too, I have easiest things to do in the classroom at tweeting. I think the tweeting piece takes time, and I'll admit on certain days I certainly seem to be able to send out more, and on other days I send out less, or you kind of get involved in things and it doesn't happen quite as much, which is why I think I like the podcasting option too, because at least I know that that piece is being recorded and shared. Today I had some visitors in the classroom and I didn't find myself necessarily sending out as many tweets, but thankfully the visitors were tweeting out some information at the time, so I was able to retweet some of it. Yeah. You could also add the Twitter widget to your blog as well. So if you don't want to, I mean, I love Storify, but if you don't want to do kind of the extra step of storifying it, you could put the Twitter widget on your blog too, and then that way parents could read your tweets even if they're not following Twitter, assuming that your Twitter account is public. If it's private, it would be a little more problematic, but if it is public, then you could add it to there as well if you're interested. So it's nice to see some different things that people might be thinking about trying tonight. I hope that you are able to give something new a try, or maybe if you were already doing everything that was kind of shared here, there's something a little bit different or new or interesting just even from what was shared in the comments that you think you might be able to go back and try to even just kind of, I guess, move along to what you are already doing as well. Okay. Oh, and I guess we're at the end of our one for now. So I don't know if anybody has any additional questions or anything. If you do, please feel free to type it in the box, or if you want to take over the microphone. I think we've got maybe a minute or two left just before this recording is over. But thanks to everyone for coming tonight, and hopefully people learned a few different ideas of things that they can try to, I guess, document their own learning, as well as allowing students to document that learning too. Thanks, Dorothy. Thanks, Karen.
Thank you so much, Aviva. You always have so many useful ideas and tools to share with us and really help us expand our thinking about possible ways and very creative ways, I must say, to document student learning. I'd like to thank each of you for giving of your time to participate tonight. I too hope that you'll be able to use some of the creative ideas that Aviva shared with us tonight and incorporate in your classroom practice. They certainly, if I was in the classroom, I certainly would be using them. Please take a few minutes. Here we have the map of Ontario, and it's great to see that we've got people from the south as always, but I guess it was Barb and Sharon from the north. So it's great to be able to share with people across the province. It's Karen. I'm sorry. It's Karen that's up in the north. Sorry, Karen, but welcome, and please come back. Take a few minutes. Louise, do you mind putting on the feedback link? Take a few minutes to press the link and share your feedback with us. We certainly value your feedback, and your feedback helps us shape the program. Do take a look at the link at the bottom left-hand corner and look at sessions that are coming up. As I said at the beginning, we have quite a variety and quite a number of webinars this year to help teachers in technology and in the area of math, and in addition to that, critical thinking and all sorts of other wonderful topics. Share the link with your colleagues, because I know there's a lot of teachers that aren't aware, they don't get the email, they're not aware of OTF Connect. So it would be wonderful to have some of your colleagues join us. So thank you all again, and have a good night.